Okay, everyone, hello. Welcome back to Concordia University's Force Space for Re-envisioning music therapy as a creative means for culture change and social justice in long-term care. We're running this as a Zoom meeting specifically for our people joining us there. If you have any comments or questions, you can pop them into the chat, and anyone presenting, you can just talk to us if you have any technical questions. With that, it's very much my pleasure to pass it over to Laurel Young to lead the workshop. Laurel, over to you.
And Taylor, Kurta, and Miya Adout. We're co-sharing our responsibilities.
Co-sharing with Miya and Taylor. Welcome to you both also. Thank you.
So if we could go to the next slide, Miya, and whenever you're ready, Taylor. Now I can use a little help on this. Come gather round, people, we've a story to tell about a time when our systems were not working well. In Canadian facilities where aging folks dwell, for decades problems had plagued them, while we stood idly by, few were heeding the cries, all the plights we were evading. Then in March 2020, the whole world shut down. Pandemic panic began to abound. Through lockdowns and masking alarms, they did sound. For lost lives we should have been saving. Oh, the world was enraged, said that things need to change. No more lies or lame explanations. So 4 years have passed, where are we now? Have we forgotten the lesson somehow? A culture of caring needs more than just words. Our priorities need rearranging, seeking justice for all, and the order is tall, but it's time for things to start changing. Taylor? Yes, it's time for things to start changing. Thank you for listening to and singing along a little bit with our protest song. So a protest song, or a protest anthem, is meant to promote solidarity and mobilization against prevailing ideas, discourses, and actions that are perpetuating social injuries, thus serving as a catalyst for social change. And when we looked at our title, and I looked at creative means, I thought, that's a nice word, but it's not strong enough for what we want to say. When we say creative means, what we're talking about is a dynamic, powerful force for change, a catalyst, and that's what we're talking about today in terms of music therapy. So I'm going to pass it on over to Miya, who is, oh no, sorry, I'm wrong. We're going to do an audience poll first. So if you want to use your phones, you can use the QR code, or you can just write down some answers to these questions. And we're going to come back to these in a little while. So the first question is, what does culture change in long-term care mean to you? So the answers don't have to be very long. The second question is, what do you perceive as barriers to culture change in long-term care? Is it coming up for you on the QR code?
Coming in a minute.
Good. It says the folder's not active, Miya.
There are no active polls at the moment.
So go for, there's polls, what's on the other side of the phone? Try Q&A. Try flipping back and forth between those two things. Okay, so what we're going to do is just get you to write them down.
Okay.
This is our second crack at trying to use this QR code.
Good game, but.
We're going to get it. By the fifth presentation, it's going to be flawless. So again, the second question was, what do you perceive as barriers to culture change in long-term care? And then how might music or music therapy contribute to culture change in long-term care? So you know, Miya, when we go to the discussion component, we might come back to this slide just to remind everybody. Okay, great. Perfect. And I think we've got some people writing in the chat, which is excellent. So now, I had jumped the gun. We are each going to answer this question, and Miya is going to go first. So over to you, Miya.
Hello, everybody. I hope you can hear me well. So who am I and why am I here? Amongst many things, I am the product of two spectacular women, the matriarchs of my family, my grandmothers, who both recently lost their lives to a dementia diagnosis. In many ways, who I am and why I'm here is quite intertwined. One grandmother, who I lovingly called Bubby, was an artist, a painter and sculptor, who spent much of her life expressing herself through the arts. The other, Safta, naturally used music and dance to fill her home with warmth and uplift her spirit through what was a very difficult and very beautiful life. Because of them, I always knew the transformative power of creative self-expression. And when they were living with dementia at the end of life, music and music therapy brought our family connection and comfort in ways that truly transformed the environment they were in and the culture of the long-term care home. Those experiences will stay with my family forever. I didn't always know that I was going to have a passion for working in long-term care as a music therapist. When I first sought out to become a music therapist, I had no intention of working with aging communities. However, my first placement was in a dementia care home in Montreal, and on my very first day, my supervisor instructed me to simply observe the residents and how they engaged both in music therapy, and without music. Of course, on that first day, I was amazed. I was amazed that when music was used with care and with a focus on building relationship and connection, what could be done, not only for the residents, but for the entire feel of the home. I think it was a combination of witnessing this, as well as the feeling that these individuals were a bit left behind by society, and that the stigma around their diagnosis was very real. I also observed that not many of my peers were very excited to work in long-term care or motivated by this population. And that gave me an even stronger sense of wanting to ensure that they had access to quality care. 8 years ago, I opened my private practice. At the time, it was called Miya Music Therapy. Now it's called Miya Creative Care. We partner with over 65 care communities across Ontario, and our purpose at Miya Creative Care is to empower and enrich lives with the creative arts therapies. We do this by building strong partnerships with care facilities, mainly in long-term care homes, and our goal is to truly integrate music therapy and other creative arts as a key component of the care team. This way, we're able to address not only residents' needs and goals, but the entire community and culture of the home, impacting quality of life, staff wellness, and family experience. I am here because I believe when music therapy, and what I often refer to as music with intention, is incorporated into long-term care into many aspects of the home, such as helping residents transition, supporting families, palliative care, celebrations of life, to safe use of music devices in individual rooms, the dining hall, specialty community programs, we can truly realize a culture of community, dignity, and empowerment.
Thanks, Miya. I'm next. So who am I and why am I here? So I've been a music therapist for almost 30 years. I can't believe where that time has gone. Initially, I was inspired to enter the profession because of student summer jobs I had in an activity department of long-term care facilities while I was studying music in a university in the Maritimes between 1986 and 1990. When I was 18, I really didn't want this job at first. I wanted a cool job. I wanted to work at Le Chateau. Anybody remember Le Chateau? I realized when we were presenting this last week that if I got that job at Le Chateau, I might not be a music therapist. But that feeling went away pretty quickly as I began to form relationships with the residents, often through sharing music. I was really fascinated by how some folks who had had a stroke could sing even though they couldn't speak. There was one man on a hunger strike, very angry about the circumstances that had brought him to long-term care, who would eat if I timed my music visits to coincide with mealtime. I worked on locked units where persons with dementia would stop wandering to engage with me and the live music I was providing. Others who had been deemed as quote-unquote unreachable would awaken and respond. It's also important to note that these awakenings were not like those happy, joyful moments, not always like those happy, joyful moments that have gone viral on social media. I'm sure some of you have seen those. But often they were also expressions of sadness, longing, or even anger. But the point is that they were engaging in relational interactions and expressing themselves even though I was told they weren't supposed to be able to do that. I knew there was more to this than meets the eye, so I took a trip to my university library and discovered this profession called music therapy. So in 1991, I moved to Waterloo, Ontario, and I started my first of 3 music therapy degrees. Since then, I have worked in long-term care settings as a music therapist, and I've even been privileged to work full-time in various long-term care settings as an integrated part of the multidisciplinary team, which is actually pretty rare. And now in my role as a music therapy professor at Concordia, I supervise, advise, and teach students who do practicums in long-term care. Since 2018, I've been the Associate Director of Engage, our Center for Research on Aging, and I do research with older adults in various contexts, with a particular focus on dementia and end-of-life care. So you might think that I'm here because I'm advocating for more consistent and more equitable access to music therapy services for long-term care residents. Well, I've been doing that for probably about 30 years now, and for the most part, that's not working as well as I would like it to. I believe that this is due in part to the fact that people hold all kinds of limiting assumptions about what they think music therapy is and what they think a music therapist does or can do in long-term care. I've realized that I need to be much more explicit about the fact that I'm actually advocating for a better, more humane, more comprehensive system, one wherein long-term care residents and their loved ones are empowered to live their best lives as their needs evolve over time up to and including the end of their lives. And one where a broader spectrum of healthcare workers are all valued for the work that they do. And yes, because I am a music therapist, explain how or why music therapy and music therapists should be considered as an integral part of that better system. And I'm going to pass it now over to Taylor.
Hi, everyone. So my name's Taylor Kurta. I'm a music therapist, a singer-songwriter, and a PhD candidate at the University of Waterloo, researching the use of collaborative songwriting with people living with dementia to challenge stigma. Before becoming a music therapist, I was in the music industry for a while. I actually ended up dropping out of high school and found my way back into school through songwriting. So songwriting is a very important part of my life. My intro is really short because the reason I'm here today directly relates to the first question we're going to address in today's session. Maya, do you mind just changing the slide? Sorry. There we go, perfect. So each of us are going to address each of these questions in today's session. So the first question is, what does culture change in long-term care mean to us? I come to this work first and foremost as a granddaughter to 6 grandparents. From a very young age, I witnessed how the treatment of older adults in long-term care really affected them. For example, my grandfather, Jerry, who was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease at the age of 45, moved into long-term care when he turned 58 after experiencing challenges from Lewy body dementia. I remember going to visit him and listening to him speak as he shared missing his home, my grandmother, and his freedom. One night he yelled for a nurse to come to his room because he was in pain. No one came, and the next day he died of sepsis. My grandfather Richard was a World War II veteran who developed dementia in his 90s and was moved into a long-term care facility. The first time I went to visit him, he told me, "It's a really nice prison." After my grandfather died, my grandmother's cognitive and physical health started to decline. One day I rushed to my grandmother's apartment after receiving a call from EMS that she had fallen earlier in the day. Upon arrival, a paramedic began to speak to me as if my grandmother wasn't even in the room. "Old people are wonderful," he said, "but they put a strain on the system." When she was diagnosed with cancer towards the end of her life, she swore to me that she would never move into long-term care. Instead, she decided to die in a hospital room with 4 other people. Lastly, my Zadie, my grandfather Willie, a Holocaust survivor, embodied resilience, strength, and courage, despite his parents and 7 siblings being murdered in a concentration camp. In the summer of 2019, I received a call that my Zadie had had a stroke. I raced into the emergency room to witness him in restraints with a blank look in his eyes. The doctor informed me that he was agitated and antagonizing hospital staff, and I should mention he was about 4'11", so I don't think he could have done much harm. After being given antipsychotic medication, he calmed down enough so that the restraints could be removed. However, as the medication wore off, he became agitated again. This time I witnessed what happened when they tried to restrain him. He screamed in a way that has been forever etched into my memory. It was a scream that caused me to involuntarily cry out for him. The next day, when I was sitting beside him in his hospital room, he apologized to me. He explained that hospitals made him feel like he was back in Auschwitz. And while this experience happened in a hospital, his anxiety did not dissipate after moving into long-term care. I often received calls from him screaming, saying he wanted to come home. As we know, COVID-19 has had a devastating toll on long-term care, exposing systematic issues which were present long before the start of the pandemic. As someone working in long-term care during this time, I saw people locked and confined to their rooms for months at a time, unable to see or visit with their family and friends. I also sang at the bedside to people who were forced to die without their loved ones by their side. And unfortunately, I really wasn't alone in what I was seeing. In Ontario's Long-Term Care COVID-19 Commission final report in 2021, many residents living in long-term care settings experienced confinement syndrome, a condition prevalent among individuals put in solitary confinement. For example, one resident in long-term care shared, "I've been in what I call a pandemic prison and solitary since April of 2020. The solitary happens when anyone tests positive in the entire home, and every single one of us must stay in our rooms without being allowed a shower. And even same goes for when we return from a hospital stay. 14 days isolation, no shower." So what does culture change in long-term care mean to me? It means a culture where older adults are not only cared for, but supported in living and thriving. It means cultivating a community, a space where older adults are not hidden away, but integrated into the community. And this is not to say that there's not examples of long-term care homes in Canada doing these things already. I know of many who are. But it is to say that we have a long way to go to ensure that our grandparents, parents, and future selves are supported in living their best lives. So I'm going to address question 2 now. So what are some barriers to culture change in long-term care, and how have these impacted music therapy practice? So there's obviously many barriers to culture change in long-term care, but I'm going to speak to the way I feel that stigma associated with dementia and aging more broadly creates barriers to culture change in long-term care. Working as a music therapist in long-term care and now doing research with people living with dementia, so many people ask me why I work with this population, if I find it depressing. They ask if I've ever been hit, and are surprised when they hear that my research uses collaborative songwriting with people living with dementia, because they think that having a dementia diagnosis means that you can't engage in meaningful activities. This pervasive stigma is also really apparent in the dementia literature, which often depicts people living with dementia as doomed, socially dead, aggressive, confused, and really in need of fixing and curing. The focus on treating and fixing symptoms of dementia and aging more broadly has perpetuated a model of care focused on curing symptoms of illness and disease, which really has impacted the lives of older adults living in long-term care. I want to note while this model is not really inherently bad, so for example, if I needed heart surgery, I really want this model, but it's really not always helpful when we're in long-term care where we're in people's homes. By focusing on fixing or curing, the biomedical model also contributes to a culture where illness and disability are seen as a fault and problem of the individual rather than something embedded in broader social, cultural, political, and institutional systems and structures. For example, could it be that people living with dementia are not aggressive by the nature of the disease, but perhaps frustrated with living on a locked unit in long-term care? The focus of fixing or curing is also really prevalent in the music therapy space in the dementia context and older adults living in long-term care more broadly. For example, a literature review I recently conducted on music therapy with people living with dementia specifically, in this study, in this literature review, the majority of studies use music to treat symptoms of dementia. And what I find really interesting about this is that within the music therapy profession itself, there are so many models and approaches to practice which resist the biomedical model, choosing instead to focus on the use of music to build relationships as a mode for creative self-expression and as a tool for social justice. These are approaches which all of us, me, Miya, and Laurel, take up in our practices, and the models which many other music therapists use in theirs. However, when it comes to the dementia literature, music therapy and the use of music more broadly so often focuses on treating symptoms. And this really puts music therapists in a difficult position. In a world which prioritizes certain types of knowledges, in this case, I'm going to refer to that as the hard sciences, approaches to practice which prioritize creative self-expression, relationships, and social justice are sometimes less valued, making it really difficult for music therapists who are already quite undervalued in the healthcare system to come out and say that they do this type of work in long-term care. And this is really what I see as a major barrier to music therapy being used as a catalyst for change in long-term care. Despite the vastness of research and practice, which have shown how well situated music therapy can be for issues related to oppression, marginalization, and changing the landscape of care environments, when it comes to research and long-term care, music therapy is often valued in terms of how well it can treat or cure symptoms of disease. And the last question I'm going to talk on today is, what is my vision for realizing music therapy as a means for social justice and culture change in long-term care? So in my work as a music therapist, I've really witnessed a lot how music therapy can shift the culture of change in a home on many occasions. One example I'm going to share with you today happened at the start of the pandemic when the group programming I was doing in long-term care had to be canceled. For years prior to the pandemic, I would lead a weekly choir with a group of about 60 residents. This was a space where we would sing at the top of our lungs, laugh, and create new and long-lasting friendships with one another. When we had to cancel the choir, many of the residents shared how they missed singing with their friends. This was also during the part of the pandemic where residents were unable to leave their rooms. To create a sense of community and joy in a time where there was so little joy to be had, residents would sit at the door of their rooms, and I would walk through the hallway singing songs that we would sing together in choir. So for an hour each week, we would all sing together, albeit a little bit further away than usual. And during these singing experiences, I also noticed staff coming in to join to sing with us. And through the use of music therapy, we could cultivate a community during a time of dire isolation. In my doctoral research, I'm trying to realize music therapy as a means for social justice through collaborative songwriting. Partnering with a long-term care home in Mississauga, Ontario, this research is going to collaborate with 6 to 10 residents to write a song about what they want the world to know about them. This research is also in partnership with Metalworks Studio, a professional recording studio which has agreed to offer free recording time and a professional sound engineer to mix and master the recording. And excitingly, we're also going to be recording the song in the exact same room that Anne Murray recorded one of her albums. So we're all very excited about that. And during the recording process, we're also going to be creating a live off-the-floor music video showing songwriters recording their song in this studio. And after that, we're going to be hosting a release party where we're going to showcase the song and music video to the broader community. In doing this project, I really hope to provide a framework where music therapy can be used not as a tool to cure or fix people living in long-term care, but to support them in sharing their strengths, asserting their power, and advocating for the change they want to see in decisions made about their lives. And I'm going to hand it over to Miya now to answer the 3 questions.
Thank you, Taylor. Okay, so I'm going to begin also with what does culture change in long-term care mean to me? So for me, culture change in long-term care signifies a fundamental shift in priorities that are realized through actionable changes to how we provide care. Before talking about culture change, I think it's important that we first define what a culture of a long-term care home means to us. For me, it's a unique blend of values, beliefs, and practices, and the manner that they're implemented and felt by everyone in the home, both residents, family, and care providers. In my experience, despite most long-term care homes having similar guiding principles and values, the way that those approaches are implemented can vary quite drastically from home to home. Now, I know I can't see you there in the audience, but I'll just trust that you'll that someone's looking. But I'd like to ask you, how many of you have been into a long-term care home and just sensed immediately upon walking in a sense of warmth and a sense that there were genuine connections being made? Oh, I can see you now. Great. Between care providers and staff. So we'll just show a raise of hands of how many have felt that sense of culture and community immediately upon entering a home. I know I have.
We have somebody over in the corner raising their hand.
Okay, great.
Oh,
I'm not
somebody in
alone.
the back.
I'm not alone. And the opposite is true as well. Throughout my career, I've worked in many different long-term care homes, and in some, it really is clear from the moment you walk in that relationships and community are at the forefront of the environment. You can feel that warmth the moment you walk in, and it's being carried out in big and small ways. Where in other homes, the culture of care can seem hyper-focused on physical and biomedical needs, which of course are vital, but there's a sense that their guiding principles of person-centered care get left behind. I most definitely recognize that this is often due to barriers that are out of care providers' control. However, I have found the discrepancy between the culture of homes to be very drastic. So for me, culture change in long-term care means an environment that first and foremost is self-aware and open to change, and finds creative ways to implement those guiding principles and embed them into the environment of the home. So in regards to what are some barriers to culture change, we know that there are many barriers to change in long-term care. I'm just going to address a few that I have noted throughout my career thus far. The first is that I truly believe, although I think we've come a long way, that music therapy and the other creative arts therapies have just not been fully understood or embraced in their full potential to enhance the community's environment and support flourishing communities across the board. Not always, but it is often the case that music therapists are dropping in and out of homes, so coming into a home for a quick one-to-one or group session, rather than embracing the potential to create change in all aspects of the home and to be consulted on how care providers are using music when music therapists aren't there. I've also found that when it comes to ensuring consistency in care, that many systems are put in place regarding physical and biomedical needs, but that when it comes to things like music therapy and other psychosocial services, there's less focus on a consistent standard of how this kind of care is implemented. And I think that this is an area of focus moving forward. I'd also just like to touch briefly upon another barrier that I've noticed in the music therapy and other creative arts therapies field, which is a general lack of interest among entering professionals to this field in working in long-term care. Now, this is possibly due to the preconceptions of the nature of the work or the settings themselves. Often prioritizing outcome-driven treatment can often trump the desire to improve quality of life in a broader scope. And I think that is a problem that needs to be addressed. as we move forward. So what is my vision for realizing music therapy as a means for social justice and culture change in long-term care? I really realize my vision through my company, Miya Creative Care, and the systems and processes we've put in place to ensuring that the homes we are working with really understand how we can be utilized to our fullest extent. So I'm going to share with you a few of those processes we put in place in my company to try and make that happen. The first is that our goal is to really be an integrated part of the care team. And so we place an emphasis on having our therapists in homes for a full day or more, and not just dropping in and out quickly to provide those quick sessions. We try to make those full days and longer hours more accessible so that we can really be part of the care team. The very first thing we do when we start a care partnership with a long-term care home is ensure that the care providers and the families of the residents know who we are and what we're doing there, and know the unexpected ways that music therapy can have an impact. For example, we ensure that there is a presentation or Q&A given to all the care providers on staff, and that they know that they can call on us, the music therapists, when a resident is having a hard time transitioning to the home, when there's heightened anxiety, and they can even consult on us when a resident is having trouble with their daily life activities, such as their bath time. We also share that when we are there for a full day or more and truly integrated, we can do things other than one-to-one sessions. We can actually sit on care committees, including behavioral support committees and palliative care committees. So I had the pleasure of sitting on a palliative care committee when I was a music therapist at a home for 3 full days per week. And this gave me the opportunity to share some insights with the palliative care committee as to what I was observing on the floor with the residents. One example I can share with you is that I was noticing as the music therapist that many residents were having a hard time when their peers or their friends on their unit or floor were passing away. And that the celebrations of life that took place, at least at this home, were quarterly, sometimes biannually. And it was not enough, or it wasn't immediate enough of an opportunity to express their grief in losing a friend. So we developed a process in which at the end of each week, the care team would let me know who had passed away on which unit. And we'd do something we call Together in Song, where we'd meet on the floor, and hopefully, if I had the chance to know the resident or speak with their family, come together in a song that was meaningful for that particular resident who had passed, and give the staff, providers, the families, and the residents an opportunity to come together and share in their loss. One last example I'll share with you of what can be accomplished when we are fully integrated as part of that care team is something that we offer our homes, which is called the talent show. I implemented the talent show because I noticed that within music therapy sessions, we can see so many of the residents' strengths come out and shine. And oftentimes, care providers and families would walk by the rooms and catch a glimpse of our session and say, wow, I had no idea the resident was capable of singing that entire song or engaging in such a meaningful, connected way. And I thought, well, something important is happening here regarding destigmatizing their diagnosis or their stay in this home. So we wanted to bring this to the greater community of the home by offering these yearly talent shows. When I did these, the goal was to empower the residents to work on a special project, to showcase their talents, and to have care providers see their strengths in new lights. What I didn't expect, and it was just a fun after effect that I didn't realize would occur, was that there was also a really important element of getting the community together in music. So we had residents and care providers and family members working together on this joint project collaborating. Sometimes we'd have care providers and residents working on a song together that they would perform. And this really helped to humanize residents and to create a collaborative community feel. And ultimately, it really helped to actualize those person-centered values that the home cared about and had as their guiding principles. During COVID, we did these talent shows in a different way, of course, by recording each individual resident's performances and making a music video with the staff. The residents got to sometimes watch these talent shows in their room and enjoy their residents and staff performances, and these were also sent to family members, which were incredibly meaningful at the time. So all in all, my vision is seeing music and other creative arts therapies more fully integrated into homes with a better understanding of how they can be utilized, as well as more of a focus on consistency in the quality of these psychosocial services. So I'm really hoping that we can continue forward with not just talking the talk, but walking the walk for more compassionate, equitable, and respectful care. I'm going to pass it over to Laurel.
Okay, so we're throwing a lot of information at you, and I'm going to throw some more. So before we do that, if you want to do a little stretch or a little, tapping your feet on the floor, just to refocus a little bit. So I am going to be the last one today answering these 3 questions. So what does culture change in long-term care mean to me? So culture change involves the reconstruction of a cultural concept of a society. So not only do we need to change the systemic issues that negatively impact the ways in which many Canadian long-term care facilities are run, and we do not have time to get into that very complex topic today. We would run out of time. But we also need to work toward changing the ways that our society thinks about long-term care and the way that we think about the people who live and work in long-term care. We hear a lot these days about people wanting to age in place and have the support that they need to stay in their own homes, and that is completely understandable. However, I think it's irrational to think that we can eliminate long-term care facilities, or even that we should. As Canadian sociologist Pat Armstrong has indicated, congregate care can be a positive or even a preferred option for some aging adults if they are moving into an inclusive context where individual residents and their loved ones are supported to make explicit choices and implicit choices when they're unable to use words about what they want and need, and are provided with opportunities to engage in their lives in ways that are personally meaningful and culturally relevant, feeling connected to their identity and sense of self in the here and now, and even thinking of possibilities for the future. Rather than being a place where people are hidden away and waiting to die, long-term care facilities need to be experienced by residents, loved ones, staff, and others as socially equitable places to live and work, with each facility serving not only as a caring community in and of itself, but also considered as an integrated part of the larger community in a society where mutually beneficial and respectful intergenerational interactions can occur. So what are some barriers to culture change in long-term care, and how have these impacted music therapy practice? And you're going to hear some repetition amongst us, but we actually each have our own perspectives on these issues, but they are complementary. And we also thought, well, if we're all repeating them, we came up with this on our own, and if we're repeating them, it's like qualitative research. The theme is emerging. So we thought they bore repeating. So a barrier is, as Taylor alluded to, stigma associated with dementia, but also aging in general, ageism. A single-minded focus on loss deficit and a fatalistic assumption that moving into long-term care is the beginning of the end wrongly stigmatizes and disempowers residents by inadvertently devaluing the lives they have left to live. Furthermore, basic care requirements in long-term care focus on physiological needs and do not prioritize psychological, social, spiritual, and cultural components of health and well-being. As a result, multidisciplinary care teams are typically not composed of a diverse enough slate of professionals who could support a more holistic approach to care. And as I'm reading this, I'm thinking, when I hear we need more workers in long-term care, I think there are actually people out there if you had a more diverse scope of professionals on your team. There are people wanting to work there, you have to let us in. There is an assumption that certain kinds of psychosocial support do not need to be provided by professionally trained specialists. This type of knowledge and skill is often devalued, misunderstood, or seen as an expensive frill given funding restrictions. So these perceptions, which are barriers, have certainly limited many residents' access to a well-rounded slate of music therapy services. And as we've alluded to, for most music therapists who do work in long-term care, the hours of employment are often limited and they're not integrated as part of that care team. The breadth and depth of their professional scope of practice and the multifaceted role they could play is not well understood and often undervalued, and I am going to talk about that role a little bit later when I answer question 3. Another barrier. Society seems to be drawn towards seeking out what I call, and I've lectured on this a lot, magic pill solutions. I think that's going to be my legacy, talking about magic pill solutions. That are perceived as being cheaper than paid professionals. So for example, robot companions and personal music listening devices. I am not against technological innovation at all. But without thoughtful application, technology is not a viable solution or substitute in and of itself. It's also unfair to expect PSWs, or we call PABs, or the préposés, individuals to assume extensive responsibility for psychosocial support or care unless they are given dedicated time as part of their job and the training and support that they need. And even then, it might not work. So I found some studies conducted on the viability of personalized music listening programs and other music programs for persons living in long-term care. And they found in this study, or these studies, there was more than one, I think most of them were based out of Australia, that some caregivers, staff, and volunteers were choosing music for residents based on their own preferences or ideas of what music they thought was appropriate, often without considering the individual's needs and context. So they're taking the magic pill approach because this music makes me feel happy, it's obviously going to make you feel happy. In some instances in this study, they noted that caregiver staff failed to provide appropriate monitoring even though they had received training. Reasons cited for these issues included lack of time, buy-in, interest, or comfort in facilitating or engaging in music activities, as well as an incomplete understanding of the value of music and its potential for harm for persons living with dementia. And I won't get into those potentials for harm, but if you do want to ask me questions about that at the end, I'm happy to address those. Another barrier, as both Taylor and Miya talked about, is the focus on pathology. So the biomedical approaches to treating dementia and other issues that may arise for residents, such as mental health challenges, largely devalue the subjective experience of the individual and focus on fixing or treating disease-associated behaviors or symptoms. And as Taylor mentioned, which may not be a result of the disease in and of itself, but a result of the failure of institutional environments that are not accommodating individuals' abilities, needs, and ways of being in the world. So rather than looking at health, and we have a school of health here, and I'm going to be talking more about this at the conference, we really tend to think of health as this dichotomous thing. You're either healthy or you're ill, or healthy or you're unwell. And rather than looking at it from that dichotomous pathogenic perspective, why not consider what is called a salutogenic orientation, where good health is not simply defined by the absence of disease or illness, but rather as an ongoing process of living one's own best life as needs and circumstances evolve over time. And at Engage, we are embracing a philosophy of empowered aging. Go Kim is doing the wave over there. And that is part of our definition of what empowered aging is. And that leads into the next barrier to culture change. One size fits all evidence-based best practice approaches. That's a mouthful. I am a big fan of solid scientific research. I truly am. But only when it's relevant, and it needs to be applied and interpreted in context. So I believe that a best practices approach in long-term care goes beyond that traditional evidence-based medical orientation and needs to be situated within a more inclusive, flexible, and non-hierarchical framework of evidence. And I'm going to talk about ways of knowing the evidence needs to honor artistic, practical, experiential, cultural, ecological, and scientific ways of knowing. The scientific research that Taylor talked about that sets out to prove that music is an effective treatment for behavioral and psychological symptoms of dementia actually keeps failing to find results. I feel like I'm going through Groundhog Day. I'm reading the study. We're not finding any significant results. They fund another study on the same thing. I read the study. If I find no significant results, another study gets funded. I'm not sure why that's happening. Rather than thinking of music as a universal language that can somehow be applied in doses as a generalizable treatment for residents in long-term care, I think it's better portrayed as a cross-cultural sound medium that is recognized, appreciated, understood, and experienced differently according to each individual's personal, musical, and cultural background. It's also influenced by the context within which it occurs. No two people respond to music in the exact same way and in the same way all of the time. So think about your favorite song. You don't want to hear that every day. You don't want to hear that in every context, or your favorite kind of music. Sometimes you need silence. Why would it be any different for residents who are living in long-term care? And neuroscientists even support this perspective. That's why the study of music and neuroscience is so complicated, because it isn't a generalizable response. It's not the magic pill. So rather than thinking of music therapy as an applied treatment, it needs to be understood and conceptualized as a holistic, person-centered approach, wherein the residents are afforded opportunities to express themselves, interact with others, feel a sense of agency, and explore their evolving potentials and the love of music for its own sake. And my vision for realizing music therapy as a means for social justice and culture change in long-term care. So we've gotten to this point and we haven't even defined for you what music therapy is. So you're probably each making your own assumptions and your own definitions in your own mind. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of that. Music therapy is a scholarly discipline and a helping profession comprised of certified professional specialists. Our designation is MTA, Music Therapist Accredited. And we assume a diverse scope of practice that is unique yet complementary to a broader scope of music health and well-being practices. So I'm going to talk about the word therapy for a minute, because that's been a little bit of a millstone around our neck in a way. Because I think when people hear the word therapy, they automatically think treatment. But the Greek root of the word is therapeia, and that also means to attend, to serve, and to help. So we are not bound by that medical model treatment approach, as many assume. We engage in music experience with individuals and groups and utilize all the properties that define music with collaborative and relational intention. I like to think of us as professionals in co-creating meaning, which can reveal unexpected potentials. Music is an important resource for well-being in long-term care because it has these qualities. Music is engaging. It's motivating, it's emotional, it's physical, it's personal, it's autobiographical, and it's social. It can serve as a cultural health resource. It helps residents to feel connected to their identity and sense of self and personhood in the here and now. And it can inspire feelings of confidence and agency, like the talent show that Miya was referring to. Creative expression that is witnessed and validated by other people. It can bring diverse people together, including those in different positions of power and privilege, and those with differing abilities, beliefs, or ways of functioning. When I ran my groups in long-term care, I didn't separate according to cognitive functioning. Music is like a leveler. There's a way in which it brings people together, no matter who they are, where they come from. And this has important implications for addressing entrenched social inequities that exist in long-term care. That's what I think we should be conducting our research on. For persons living with dementia, the music functions of the brain typically do not deteriorate. So music makes sense when language and other sensory stimulation does not. Even for those who have not had a past affinity for music. because the brain is still understanding the musical input. So it's something that they understand. I think of it, imagine if you're in a country or somewhere and nobody is speaking your language and you don't understand what anybody is saying, and you hear music and you understand it. Imagine what that might feel like and the potential in that for an individual. Doesn't assume, though, that every musical encounter evokes a happy response, but acts as a meaningful life encounter when other forms of sensory input and interpersonal interaction may feel overwhelming, intangible, or confusing. I'm getting close to the end here. Through its ability to touch our fundamental humanity, music has a role to play not only within long-term care, but also to affect change in broader society, challenging harmful social norms and attitudes, and encourage people, as it did in the 1960s, to embrace the social and political changes that will move us toward a fairer and more socially just system. In collaboration with long-term care residents, their loved ones, and staff, some music or music therapy initiatives, like our opening protest song, can be utilized to challenge negative stereotypes and perceived limitations and draw attention to social injustices resulting from poor or inadequate government policy. As an integrated part of Canadian long-term care systems and multidisciplinary care teams, I believe that music therapists should not only provide a range of direct music therapy services for residents, not to treat symptoms and behaviors, but to support and enhance personalized musical engagement within a relationship. But also, I believe they should serve as professional leaders or consultants and collaborative advocates to help ensure that long-term care residents have full access to a scope of quality music experiences and supportive sound environments that will meet their evolving needs and preferences in context over time. In collaboration with others, music therapists need to carry out their work in ways that radically reimagine long-term care culture and challenge unjust social systems that produce negative health and well-being outcomes for all. When looking at the big picture, I believe that a multidimensional music therapist-led model is valuable and actually a cost-effective service rather than a cost-prohibitive one. A perspective that we hope will be given more serious consideration since the pandemic did painfully expose what many of us already knew, that we are failing to provide many of our residents in long-term care with adequate access to the psychosocial necessities of life. And I'll end it there. Thank you. So I don't know if we're going to be able to, we don't have the poll, but we're going to go back to those questions that we had for the poll and see if you had any answers. And also feel free to bring up discussion topics, questions about the presentation. Yes.
I'm just going to bring a microphone so that everyone on Zoom can hear.
Thank you all. My name is Rose. I am a recent graduate from Concordia. I just did my undergrad in policy and community studies with a minor in women's studies. And yeah, this was really, really interesting. My question is around research. And from listening, it sounds like, there's an overemphasis on scientific research in some ways, or like, I know in a lot of ways it's like, well, the research has been done for so long, we just keep asking for one more report, but we know what the issue is. Climate change kind of an example, like we don't need one more report to tell us, we need action. But I am curious, maybe any of your perspectives on where are the areas of uncertainty, or where would more research be helpful, or would it be helpful? I think one of you touched on like entrenched social inequities in long-term care, and if you wanted to expand on like what kind of research would be needed.
I can take that, but I'll let the online folks maybe do it first if they want.
Laurel, you can go, maybe you go ahead first.
So yeah, we'll all probably answer little parts of that because that's a big question. I'm not sure that we need more research. We need better research. you know? And I think we need to, the research is about trying to figure out how to challenge the stigmas and re-envision what it could be. And so we need to find out how we can, I think that the question is, just off the top of my head, really understanding the barriers and understanding how change might happen. Right? So it's more about looking at the problems in the system. I mean, I think there's lots of things that just seem like absolute common sense to me, and we actually do have some science to support the argument that we are actually telling you. And it's not that we're against scientific research, it's just this sort of narrow focus on one way of knowing and one way of evaluating and one way of thinking about things is actually not helpful. And we shouldn't be going into any research thinking trying to prove something. Like, good scientific research doesn't try to prove something, you try to disprove something. And so society wants some simple solutions to complex problems. And so when we go to try to prove a simple solution, we're probably not going to succeed. So I want to give my colleagues an opportunity as well.
Maya, do you mind if I go next? Okay. So I actually think we do need more research, but we need, like Laurel said, different kinds of research. A really big turning point for me in my career, my master's is in music and neuroscience, so very scientific, and I'm not against scientific research at all. But when I got into my PhD, when I was doing my coursework and I was learning about different ways of knowing and different things that research can do, my understanding of what research can look like really expanded. And for me, I can see when we sort of shift of what research needing to prove something to conducting research or conducting research that aims to challenge things, I think we can make a big difference. And I don't think that there's enough of that type of research in this field specifically. And I think now is the time to do it when people are still paying attention. Yeah. I don't know if that answers your question, but.
And we need the funding to do it. So we also have to convince the
Okay.
funders that the parameters of what they're going to fund need to be different.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll leave that to Laurel and Taylor. They're the research experts.
Other questions or comments? Yes, Marlene in the back.
You invited the question yourself about the potential for harm.
Yes.
Can you expand a little bit on that?
Yes, so hopefully I have them written down, so hopefully I'll remember them all. You would think I would because I talk about it a lot. There's a few things. People need to be able to control the sound source. So if you leave somebody in their room, in a wheelchair, in a concert, put a personal music listening device on them and they can't control that, imagine what that feels like. And I have heard instances where colleagues of mine have been walking, by the room of a person. They sound agitated on the inside. They say to the, other staff, "What's going on?" "Oh, that's just Mrs. So-and-so. She's like that." They go in, they take off the personal music listening device, they turn off the television, and it goes away. Music can also bring up complex emotions for people, which is great. But then we need to be prepared to support individuals who might need help processing those complex emotions. Again, leaving folks unattended and having some kind of emotional response to the music. They might need to be able to talk about it. They might need that feeling validated. Also, there is some research that shows that music sort of temporarily orients people back to time and place, to the here and now. And that's terrific too, but what are we bringing them back to if they all of a sudden realize that they're not here or their spouse is not with them or whatever? Hearing impairment is a predictor of dementia. So that's been a scientific reality. It doesn't mean that it causes it, but there's definitely a correlation. So a lot of hearing impairments go undiagnosed in persons living with dementia, and that's not being considered when people are using music with them. So sometimes people are putting in headphones or earbuds on people that it might actually be painful for them, or the music might feel very distorted for them, and that can be another agitating thing. I know I've got a couple more. Taylor and Maya, do you have any that you want to add there?
Sure. One example I often give is, to Laurel, you mentioned the magic pill solution that tends to be, how music is viewed. in long-term care settings. And so what I see often is, to no fault of their own, but sometimes care providers or families noticing that perhaps their loved one is agitated and deciding to put on a song that their loved one or that the resident might really like, but that's really kind of happy-go-lucky, in an effort to hopefully turn around their mood, and put them in a better mood. And I always like to share, if you were talking to your friend and telling them you've had a really bad day and you're feeling really frustrated, and they were to say to you, oh, just, feel better. It's fine. You're okay. It wouldn't feel good, right? You'd need to feel validated first. And it's the same thing with music. And so I find that when care providers are putting on songs that they think will just switch the mood of a resident, that in fact it's often best, or sometimes best, to meet the resident where they are within the music, in the same way you would when you're talking to your friend who's having a bad day. So that's one example that I see quite frequently in the homes.
And lastly, I think cultural sensitivity around music is also really important, and potential for harm. I know, working with Holocaust survivors, not a lot, but some Holocaust survivors don't want to hear certain songs from in Hebrew or Yiddish or whatever that is for them, because it brings up painful memories. And some are okay with it, but when we're not aware of that, we could assume, oh, someone's Jewish and play a certain song, but it actually might be harmful. So just being aware of that is also really important.
And so there's also been studies that look at cross ages using music to ruminate. So folks that suffer from depression sometimes will use music that actually keeps them in the depression, right? And I actually have found at least one study, maybe two, I have to go look at my article, that actually looked at this for persons living with dementia who suffered depression pre-dementia, may be attracted to music that will actually increase their rumination and not actually improve or help their mood. If they had that tendency prior, that's something that may be implicated for them that we would need to know about. This isn't really harm, but another thing that many people don't know about is that with frontotemporal lobe type dementias, music preferences and the ways in which people perceive music actually can be impacted. And it doesn't mean that these individuals don't necessarily benefit from music when it's used in the right way at the right time for them, but it might not be what you expect. And so those individuals, I have had many music therapists and also personal situations where I have all of the person's favorite music and none of it is working. None of it's having an impact. And then I try something else and voila. So there's just all of these things to consider. It's not the magic pill solution. I hope that was answered your question, Marlene. I did see somebody over here,
Yeah, we have
and
a
then
question.
yeah. You're okay? Okay. Yeah.
Laurel, sorry, there's someone, Laurel,
Yes, there's somebody online.
there's someone online with a question. We can do that. We can answer that one after this one.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah. As a music therapist, do you work individually with the nurse, or you just do it separate
We do everything.
together?
We work it-
You work together.
We work,
Like,
yeah, we work together. We work alone with individuals. We work in groups. We work with other multidisciplinary professionals. Yep. We will get to that person online. Don't worry.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for sharing. I'm wondering, as much as you said music is universal, silence also is.
Oh, absolutely.
I wonder what parts of your practices or your studies, for Taylor as well, where silence is used in music therapy. And silence, I mean, listening to the body, like different kinds of music that isn't just music.
You're going to take me off on a whole other tangent.
It is a university, so there's time for lecture. So other than, the sound, like, do you look at sight? Is there a sense, like you said, trying all these songs that doesn't work?
Breathing,
Yeah.
breath.
Just wondering how it works.
I feel that, in a session, I don't even need to use music all of the time. You know, if I work with somebody, I'm not going to force music on them. But if they want me to be with them, how can I be there in that silence, in that shared space, and in ways that are actually musical in the way that I am with them and approach. Sometimes I sit with somebody and I breathe. I'm going to hand that over to my colleagues as well. Taylor or Miya?
Me and Maya are just looking at each other. Do you have something? Go ahead.
I'm in agreement. Yes, we oftentimes are sitting in silence, and there's a lot of silence that can be used within the music as well. So we don't always have to sing through a whole song or improvise for the whole session. There are breaths and pauses and silence within the music that we can use for the residents' benefit. So there are definitely many moments of silence, many moments of walking along the hallways with residents and just being by their side, and maybe after a few weeks of building comfort and rapport, starting to bring in some rhythm and some music slowly into their space and their world.
I also think sound environments is a very important part of music therapists' work. And prior to me coming to my job at Concordia in 2011, I never got to complete it. But a colleague and I, we went around a long-term care facility and we recorded about 10 different kinds of noises and then played them for an audience and got them to figure out what they were. But they were horrific, like doors slamming, people yelling, out of tune radio stations, just all kinds of things in the environment that just aren't healthy and agitate. Have you ever been in a situation where the old building I used to work in here, it had a lot of fans, it had a lot of rattling and a lot of noise, and then around 6, I'd be working late, and at 6 o'clock it would all shut off, and I would go, you know, and I think long-term care environments and those working in those environments need to be more aware. And I think some folks who are living with dementia are hypersensitive and really need those breaks and that silence. So absolutely, it's not about forcing music at all. Sorry, Taylor, I got excited again.
No, I have nothing else to say on that. You both covered it really well.
So I think we're coming up close to the end. Could we have our second last slide, Miya? Oh, there, that's it, the key takeaways. So I'll just read them quickly, but if you want to reflect upon our talk a little bit more today, feel free to take a picture of this with your phone to think about it. So the key takeaways for today, I can't use the mic and look at them at the same time. Explicit and implicit barriers to culture change in long-term care impose limitations on implementing authentic, best or promising practices. We need to identify and deconstruct assumptions that we or others hold about music therapy and long-term care and define what true culture change and social justice in this setting really means. And finally, when realized within an integrated, collaborative, and multidimensional approach, music therapy holds unique and inherent potential as a creative and dynamic means of facilitating culture change and spearheading social justice initiatives in long-term care. And I think, Taylor, you did me a favor and you answered that person's question online, didn't you?
Yep, there was one more above, just asking if we've ever built partnerships in long-term care to build the case so we can lobby for the government and teaching establishments to fund and promote the value and cost effectiveness of providing music therapy.
Well, we have to figure out how we're going to define what's cost important. So, yeah, yes, but it's a hard job because every province is a different system.
Yeah.
Kim.
I have a question for Miya. I'm curious because you set up a business for yourself, kind of a social entrepreneurship. Can you hear me? Oh, I guess, oh, hi. My question is for Miya. I'm really curious about the business that you've set up that are you the sole employee? How many people do you engage? Is it a full-time thing? Was it really hard to do? Did you have to also go to business school to do this in addition to doing music therapy? And are there ways that, again, there's kind of opportunities for other forms of social entrepreneurship that might be things we haven't thought about?
Great question. Yes, so I have right now a team of just over 25 creative arts therapists, most of which are music therapists, and then we have a few art therapists and one dance movement therapist, and that is a newer field that has a lot of really interesting crossover with music therapy. In terms of was it difficult, or is it full time? So I guess the first thing to answer is that all of our therapists have a variety of hours. Some work as full-time music therapists in long-term care. Some work in more of a variety of populations and settings, also working in hospice care, working one-to-one in people's homes, in disability service centers. So it can vary, and others have just a few hours here and there. But at our company, we really do try to implement that. We believe in that integrated care. So, we're trying not to do that fly in and out of homes, and really be there for at least a full day. All of the homes that we partner with have a therapist that is consistent. So it's the therapist that's coming back week after week. And you know what? There's a lot of need out there. There's a lot of need. So in a lot of ways it is difficult, but I think that there's more than enough work and enough opportunities to bring this service to those who need it. And it's just about presenting it in a way that makes sense, and that can affect, the change and the benefits that we're hoping to see. So I hope that answers some of your questions.
Yeah, it does. Just one follow-up.
Yes.
Is there certifications that everybody who works with you has to have? And do you have to, what kind of certifications are necessary to say, I have the qualifications, my people have the training, this isn't just a fly-by-night business that we learn these skills off YouTube, like me, et cetera?
Great question. So I'll answer for music therapists. We have to, anyone joining our team or applying to a position has to be a certified music therapist. So we're looking for the credential MTA, which stands for Music Therapist Accredited. So it means that they've completed either an undergraduate or graduate diploma and or a master's degree in music therapy and completed a 1,200-hour supervised internship. And so we're looking for that designation, and we're at my company specifically, because we work most often in long-term care and in dementia care. We're looking for folks with experience with older adults, and with a passion for improving their quality of life and learning and growing in that area in particular.
I think we could keep talking, but we're going to end with some music because we only have a few seconds left. So Maya, if we could take it to the next slide. If you want to stand up, you can. You don't have to, but it might feel good to stand up because we're going to do a little bit of stamping or tapping or clapping. Anybody want to stand up? Oh, yeah. It'll feel better. So we're going to end with a protest anthem. And just so you know, sort of based on our conversation, I've been just penciling together a little verse here. So you'll just have to trust me. We'll do a little call and response. But we'll start with this song here, okay? But we're going to start with a beat. So if you could go any way you want to make that beat. We're not gonna take it. No, we're gonna make changes. We're not gonna take it anymore. Okay, I need a few more voices. We're not gonna take it. No, we're gonna make changes. We're not gonna take it anymore. Keep that beat going. We want change. We want change. Seeking justice for all. Seeking justice for all. Every person matters. Every person matters. Let's change the laws. Let's change the laws. 'Cause we're not gonna take it. No, we ain't gonna take it. We're not gonna take it anymore. Keep the beat going. A culture of caring. Means more than just words. We need action. We need to be heard. 'Cause we're not gonna take it. No, we're gonna make changes. changes. We're not gonna take it anymore. Last verse, keep the beat going. Empowered aging. Empowered aging. Now is the time. Now is the time. No more waiting. No more waiting. To live our best lives. To live our best lives. 'Cause we're not gonna take it. No, we're gonna make changes. We're not gonna take it anymore. Last time, make it a good one. We're not gonna take it. No, we're gonna make changes. 'Cause we're not gonna take it anymore. No, we're not gonna take it anymore. I feel like I need to smash my guitar. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
I'll connect with the two of you later.
It was great. Thanks, Ruth.
Thank you, Laurel. Thank you, Miya. Laurel. Taylor, everyone, thank you for coming into Force Space today for this. Those of you here in this place, please stick around and check out all of the exhibitions and different moments to experience here. For the rest of you on Zoom, we're going to be closing up the Zoom now. Thank you for joining us. See you again soon.